Can one foresee their own death at the height of a perfect victory? In the final days of May 1606, the night air of Rome was heavy with humid heat and a suffocating tension. A man with dark eyes and disheveled hair stood with a grim determination, gripping a combat dagger. Before him stood Ranuccio Tomasoni, a young man in his mid-20s and 10 years his junior, holding a sword with a hesitant and awkward stance. Their duel began with a trivial dispute, perhaps over a bet or a woman. However, the uncontrollable fury eventually drove these two men toward a fatal crossroads of life and death. This man of fiery temperament was none other than Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, the son of the Italian art world at the time. As if mocking the noble order of the Renaissance, established by Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael, he lived a life defined by alcohol and violence, wandering the back alleys of Rome. After a brutal struggle, Caravaggio's blade pierced the youth's abdomen, and the young man drew his last breath on the cold pavement. Caravaggio also suffered a deep wound to his head and was forced to vanish into the shadows. The papal court immediately issued a death sentence, and a massive bounty was placed on his head. Nowhere in Rome was he safe. Whether by luck or misfortune, Caravaggio's genius saved him from the brink of death time and again. Power players, fascinated by his intense contrast of light and shadow and his provocative compositions, were more than willing to shelter the murderer. He fled Rome to the estates of the Colonna family, then moved through Zagarolo and Palestrina before heading to Naples. Yet the life of a fugitive was always restless. No matter how powerful a nobleman might be, they could not forever block the relentless pursuit of the Pope. Ultimately, he chose to flee across the sea to the island of Malta. At that time, the Knights of St. John, renowned for their bravery, were stationed in Malta. The Grand Master of the Knights, Olaf de Wignacourt, was well aware of Caravaggio's fame and commissioned him to create masterpieces such as St. Jerome Writing and The Beheading of St. John the Baptist. Caravaggio poured blood and faith into his canvases with all his might. Greatly impressed by the quality of the paintings, Wignacourt granted him the robe of the Order of Malta and accepted him as a member of the knighthood. He now had a golden opportunity to erase the stigma of being a murderer and start a new life with the honorable status of a knight. However, the destructive instinct lurking within him did not slumber easily. At a time when he should have remained quiet and self-reflective, he once again engaged in a brawl with a fellow knight. Harsh words and violence were exchanged, and hearing of this, Wignacourt was enraged and imprisoned him in a dungeon. Caravaggio did not give up. In the dead of night, he descended the fortress walls using a rope ladder and successfully escaped to Syracuse, Sicily. Wandering from Messina to Palermo, he spent a period as dark and long as the shadows in his own paintings. The life of a fugitive devoured his soul. He was seized by such terror that an assassin might appear at any moment, and he could only sleep while clutching a dagger in his hand. Despite crumbling physically and mentally, the reason he did not lay down his brush was his obsessive passion for art and his indomitable will. He painted for the high clergy of the Roman Catholic Church, desperately seeking a pardon. Works such as the martyrdom of Saint Ursula and John the Baptist were products of a harrowing contrition born in the shadow of death. In October 1609, while staying in Naples, he was finally cornered by pursuers and suffered a merciless beating. His face was so severely disfigured that it was nearly unrecognizable, and his life hung on a thread. However, upon returning from the threshold of death, he became a different man. He resolved to break free from the cycle of revenge and hatred. He laid down the inferiority and anger that had tormented him and began to paint what would become the final masterpiece of his life. That painting was David with the head of Goliath. This work is regarded as the most painful double self-portrait in Western art history. In the face of the young David, the radiant Caravaggio of his youth is projected, and in the severed head of Goliath, his own disfigured face, burdened by sin, is contained. Many focus on the heroic narrative of David defeating the giant. They praised the dramatic moment of victory where the Israelites cheered and the Philistine army fled in terror. However, Caravaggio saw the other side of that brilliant victory. He focused on the pain of the loser and the weight of a life that a single human being had to carry, rather than the joy of the winner. Caravaggio was once a winner as well. He was a revolutionary who boldly broke the conventions of mannerism and shook Italy and France as the master of light. Numerous followers admired him and followed in his footsteps under the name Caravaggisti. Wealth and fame seemed to always stay by his side. However, the demon within him that he could not control led him to ruin. Paradoxically, the painful years spent being hunted as a murderer provided him with his most sincere time of self-reflection. The David in the painting does not wear a smile of victory as he looks down at Goliath. Instead, his eyes are filled with deep pity and sadness. Goliath's mouth, stopped in mid-breath, with eyes half open staring into the void, seems to silently cry out the futility of life. Caravaggio confessed his sins through this painting and sought forgiveness from God and the world by offering his painted head on the canvas instead of his actual head. At last, as if his earnest prayers had been heard, news arrived that his death sentence had been revoked. He headed for Rome carrying the paintings he had prepared as gifts to lessen his debt. However, the goddess of fate ultimately turned her back on him. He was arrested due to a mistake by a guard at the port of Civitavecchia and wasted 2 days, during which time the ship carrying his paintings and belongings departed for Rome. Having lost all his property and his chance for forgiveness, he ran along the beach under the scorching summer sun in despair. Exhausted from trying to catch the departing ship, he finally collapsed on the shore. Falling ill with a fever, Caravaggio passed away at a young age, not yet 40, ending his life in solitude. This painting left by Caravaggio whispers to us. Are you so intoxicated by your own victory that you have forgotten the tears of someone else? Are you so full of yourself that you cannot see your own shadow? Only when we can discover our own frailty in the distorted face of Goliath can we truly enter the path of salvation and forgiveness.
Truth often hides in the places we refuse to look. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the intersection of history, humanity, and the eternal Logos. If you seek a light that illuminates the depths of our existence, I invite you to join the Biblical Beacon community. Let us find the wisdom that transcends our brokenness together. Peace be with you.